This is a map of South Africa. All 9 provinces, clear as white, with the big Lesotho in the middle of it. We'll talk about Lesotho at another date. But when you look at the provincial map of South Africa, there's a small enclave right in the middle of KZN that is in dotted lines. For years, I've never known what it was, and I never even got an explanation because nobody ever even notices it. This piece of land is the Transkei, or part of it, and this is the entire point of this video. It's because I hate the Transkei, so here's a video about the TBVC and the Homelands. Meet the Homelands. The Homelands, or the Bantustans, were a group of areas established by the Apartheid government as areas for the black majority to live outside of the white areas of South Africa, ensuring that their policy of racial segregation remains absolute. Today's video is about those areas, and more especially the 4 original independent homelands, the TBVC, Transkei, Bophuthatswana, Venda, and the Ciskei, formally rendered independent in the mid-1970s.
I have just announced in Parliament details of the granting of self-government to the Transkei. The Transkei is the first Bantu homeland which has approached the government of the Republic to aid it by means of this great step on the road to independence.
But whenever I talk about such stuff, you really have to do a bit of background on it, and we have to go back to 1913. Look, Mom, I'm using my law degree. And let's look at some legislation. Just 46 years before the Transkei was established as the first homeland in 1959. The 1913 Land Act. Every time I talk about apartheid, somehow this ancient piece of legislation shows up, and for some disturbing reason, it's still creating chaos in today. Hi, EFF. The 1913 Natives Land Act is a piece of legislation that basically segregated land ownership in South Africa on a racial basis, granting 87% of all land in South Africa to only be for white people. Only white people could own land, only white people could move around freely, and only white people had rights. The rest need permits to even enter this part of the country, which was most of the country. 87% of the country was for white people, and black people could not enter it. So this established a system of segregation that would be the basis for segregation. White land for white people, black land for black people, the rest will have to sort it out themselves. This would further be split into 4 racial categories: white, black, colored, and Indian. White South Africans having most of the country's land and wealth. Federal laws of segregation would entrench the system of racial separate development and would manifest itself in official creation of the apartheid states in 1948. Weirdly, another apartheid state was founded in 1948 and is still not real today.
Our policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word apartheid. And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily, and perhaps much better, be described as a policy of good neighborliness, accepting that there are differences between people. But while these differences exist, and you have to acknowledge them, at the same time, you can live together, aid one another, but that it can best be done when you act as good neighbors always do.
Apartheid introduced a number of laws that are founded on the separation of racial categories, primarily for our case study, the Group Areas Act of 1950, as always, which applied to the Land Act to cities, separating residential areas for different races. Just look up apartheid spatial planning and wonder why I have to wake up at 4 a.m. to get to work at 9 a.m. Then the Bantu Authority Act, which gave powers to chiefs and tribal leaders in order to formulate their own apartheid, puppet states, puppet leaders, right? And the Promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act. This is the one that established big homelands and later separated the black majority into 18 minorities for the purpose of separate development. So this act is what basically said the black people are not just one unanimous group. There are a bunch of different groups based on tribal lines. So there's Zulu, Tswana, Pedi, Xhosa, Venda, and the Xhosa is like split into like different tribal groups. I think there's like 15 or 16 which were registered there, but the Xhosas make up the majority of the split groups, which would be like Damararabe, Dabatengu, Dama. Yeah, I forget the rest. Okay, the homelands. So there were originally 4 homelands: Transkei, Tswana, Venda, Ciskei. The TBVC for short. These were the 4 independent homelands that had their own governments and that had their own policy and flags and everything that would many people consider their own separate country today, but they're only recognized by the apartheid government and a particular state that is not real today.
Are you expecting or are you hoping to gain international recognition now as a sovereign state, now that you have renounced South Africa?
In any event, we've never been part of South Africa since we became independent.
But people refuse to recognize you, don't they, as a Transkei
Now they will
nation?
know now that we are a sovereign state.
So you are hoping to get international recognition?
Let us hope they will recognize us.
Has recognition been promised to you by certain black African countries in return for renouncing South Africa?
Not at all. We've had no communication whatsoever with the black African states.
Who will you go now for help? Which particular countries will you appeal to?
Well, we feel that Great Britain is obliged to look after us.
Great Britain?
Yes. After all, we were a province, we were a colony of Great Britain. We are in this plight today because of the colonization by Great Britain.
You also mention in your statement to Parliament the assistance you will now give to the liberation movements who are fighting against South Africa.
We will speak the same language and we shall act together.
In what way? Can you help explain
In
that?
any other way.
Will you harbour terrorists in this country who are
We
fighting?
will not harbour terrorists terrorists from outside, but we cannot say that there will be no terrorist war from Transkei so far as the Republic is concerned.
This would be extended to 10 with the addition of the 6 non-independent homelands, namely Gazankulu, KwaZulu, Libua, KwaNdebele, Kangwane, and Qwaqwa, each dedicated to its own ethnic group. Transkei and Ciskei for the Xhosa groups, so you realize that the Xhosa were like a bunch of tribal authorities and they were not unanimous, so they split them into 2. Ciskei being the one on the Ciskei River, and then the Transkei being the one that's over the Transkei. It's a lot of South African history that includes the 8 frontier wars. Is it 9 or 10 frontier wars? I never got it. Tswana for the Tswana people, which is towards the border of Botswana. Venda for the Vavenda people, which is on the in northern Limpopo towards the Mozambique and the Zimbabwe borders. Gazankulu for the Shangaan and Tsonga people, so they just united the Shangaan and Tsonga people into a single group and made their own government called Gazankulu. KwaZulu for Abizulu Tina, and then Libua for the northern two groups, which is Pedi, Lovedu, Kangakone, and others. Really interesting that the what was this movie? Series, Queen Mujaji series that was speaking Lubedu and stuff like that. It was such a great series. Really need more series like Shagai and Queen Mujaji that focuses on the creation of South African states like that. I need a Lesotho movie on King Moshoeshoe. It would be so amazing. KwaNdebele for the Ndebele people in Mpumalanga and Northern KZN, and Kangwane for the Swazi people, which united the Swaziland and parts of Mpumalanga, and Qwaqwa for the Southern Sotho. My sister goes to Qwaqwa. A lot of bad history there. The leaders of this government were generally unpopular, usually kings of ethnic groups or tribal leaders such as Mntwana Mangosuthu, Buthelezi in KwaZulu, the Mantanzima brothers in the Transkei.
In the Transkei who will be fighting against South Africa?
Well, we'll see what will happen.
Quick side note, General Bantu Holomisa being called Major General in all official reports and being made Deputy Minister of Defense makes so much history. After learning about the history of Transkei, I'm currently working on a video on the history of the Transkei, and this guy is him, basically. He is the him of the Transkei.
It says, you give a poor man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish. You give him
Let's continue. Each of these reportedly had their own government, but were largely administered by the South African government as puppet states. The government were generally marred with corruption, violent repression of opposition. Coup attempts occurred in independent states like Bantustan and the Transkei. The Apartheid government had designed a system whereby they could be rid of the black population through a policy of divide and conquer, creating nationalist states that hated each other more than they hated the Apartheid government. Basically, these tribal politics and these tribalist attitudes are still seen today. If you can open a TikTok video right now, you'll see Matsulu this, Zulu people arguing over Mapedi and stuff like that. It's a really big psyop by the Apartheid government that I consider their most successful project ever. They succeeded in creating tribal politics. Okay, the Homelands and Bantustans, from the point of view of the Apartheid government, were nothing short of a success. They successfully removed the black population from the white areas and making them hate each other, whilst also spending close to nothing on the infrastructure of these areas, which meant that black people could not be successful. They could not successfully overthrow the Apartheid government. They could not fight against the Apartheid government because they actually had nothing. They were living hand to mouth. They could not barely survive. Subsistence farming is big in these areas because the land is not viable for commercial farming and to feed the entire populations of these groups. Like, as someone who comes from one of the former homelands, the success of this is clear. These places today are filled with drugs, lack of development. There is a lot of crime and no future there. And it shows how much success and how much investment the Apartheid government puts in ensuring that the black population could not be successful. Even today, 30 years after they dethroned, we're still seeing the consequences of this system. But
in the Transkei, every Transkeian votes, you see, and you get white nationalist politicians arguing that this is a system which is going to work for the Transkei. But somehow, when it comes to the broader country, the blacks may not vote because they don't understand the sophisticated, economic patterns out here. They understand nothing. So they need to operate at a different sort of level. Now, this is all nonsense. It is meant to entrench the white man in the position in which he finds himself today. We will do away with it altogether. There will be a completely non-racial franchise, and black and white will vote as individuals in our society.